Hello everybody, this is Enshohma. What you're about to see is kind of a failed attempt to do a Q&A vlog, but I decided to post it up anyways because there are some good points that I do bring up, and I'm going to try to attempt a vlog again in the future, hopefully over this weekend. It's Thursday night right now, July 9th, and hopefully I can give you guys something a little more professional than what you're seeing right now. And yes, I finally admit it, I am a sleeping baby werewolf. I just wanted to make that clear, so that's another reason why the video didn't come out so well. Because as you can see, I don't have the working hands. Ignore the arm you see there, that's from one of my past victims. I don't have opposable thumbs, and I'm very, very tired. Very, very tired. So that's pretty much, this was one of the stupidest things I ever did. Okay, I'll talk to you guys. Enjoy the video. I'll talk to you guys later. Okay. Long time coming, everybody. I apologize for this, but this is a Q&A video that I meant to do a while ago, but then my life kind of went spiraling down into Sadville. So I'm currently house sitting for a friend, and because he has far better editing equipment than I have on my setup, I'm filming this at my house right now, and I'm going to edit all these little bits together for this viewer Q&A slash vlog, video blog, blah blah blah, at his house. So forgive me, I'm a little on the nervous side. Like I said, my life has not been going too well recently. One of the reasons I haven't been posting as much material as I originally had planned to. And not only that, but the fact that I don't have any real editing equipment also kind of puts a kibosh on a lot of my plans. But I hope to have that change before the end of the year. And that also includes some podcasts and hopefully some true short films. And no, this isn't my own original artwork. This is actually a colorist job I'm doing for a client and acquaintance, probably friend, Maurice, better known as RalphBear on YouTube. In fact, I will try to put a link to his channel in the description below. If not, though, then I screwed up there too, because I'm Enshohma. I can't do anything right, especially this incredibly horrible opening to a Q&A. So let's begin, shall we? So this first question comes from Mr. Train Freak 12. So, do you feel that the kaiju genre is dying off with the films announced, like the supposed 50th anniversary Gamera films and many modern kaiju films never seeing the light of day, and the public seemingly negative reception of them, or is it just me? My current thoughts on the state of giant monster movies, not too good, actually. In fact, there's another question that's going to be coming down soon. Two more questions actually that kind of tie back to what I'm about to say, but from different slants. Currently, there isn't really much going on in the world of giant monster movies. In fact, it's pretty bare. Like in Hollywood, you might get one good giant monster movie a year. In Japan, the genre has been regulated to children's fare, like Power Rangers and Ultraman, and even then it's way too commercial. In fact, we'll get to that later. Or the giant monster movies you do see in Japan are rare, and often these days they're independent comedies as opposed to straight-faced monster movies or action adventures. Nothing wrong with a kaiju comedy, but at the same time it would be like, I don't know, I think the best way to describe it would be, imagine, if you will, you're a big fan of vampire movies and they suddenly become very unpopular. And as such, for almost an entire decade, the only vampire movies you get are all extreme comedies. And considering the state of horror films in the late 70s and the early 80s, yeah, there really wasn't any real good vampire films. and then it kind of exploded in the mid 80s with films like Near Dark and Fright Night and The Hunger. Although I might be mistaken, I think The Hunger has absolutely nothing to do with vampires. I'm horribly mistaken. I've never seen The Hunger. I've seen I've seen Fright Night, and I've seen a little bit of Near Dark, but not that. So, but anyways, that's the state that's happening in Japan right now. That giant monster movies aren't that popular. So for almost a whole year, not counting for almost a whole decade, not counting the Millennium movies from the Millennium era Godzilla movies from Toho, most giant monster movies coming from Japan have been either tie-ins with kids series like the Power Ranger movies or the Ultraman one-offs, or worse, a lot of comedy films from independent directors. And again, nothing wrong with that. There's been some of them have actually been really good, like Gihara the Long Dark, Gihara. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I am not used to talking right now. Gihara the Long and Dark-Haired Monster, and actually that's the only one I can think of. It's a shame too, because it would be nice to see a more serious take on the genre, but either it's betrayed by the filmmakers doing something comical, or they outright try to do something serious, but the production values kind of betray them a bit. Meanwhile, in America, giant monster movies just haven't really sold, and the once-a-year giant monster films have done okay, but not well enough to justify a resurgence. Recently, however, after Pacific Rim did decent box office here in America, but did far better elsewhere around the world, things look like they might be changing for the better, and we'll get to that in a later question. But currently, at this moment, the giant monster genre, although it's improving, it's not that good. There's barely anything worth mentioning in America. We'll get to that in a moment. There's really nothing going on in Japan, but things are about to change, and I'll get into details about that after the next couple of questions. Question comes from Subjob. Are there any obscure tokusatsu or Sentai groups you would like to get some notice? This next question kind of ties back to the other question I just read. That question is, if Shout Factory releases more Sentai or other Toku TV shows on DVD in the future, like they did with Zoo Ranger, which series do you hope will be released next? Super Sentai or Tokusatsu groups that I would like to have more notice, / if Shout Factory or any other DVD company for that matter decides to release more Tokusatsu, what would I like to see? You know, I don't know. I can't pick obscure characters off the bat, and if I do, we'll be here forever if I do pick some obscure characters I like. But as far as overall television shows I would like to see more of, that actually ties back to both questions, because every time somebody asks me what sort of Japanese superhero or live action effects fantasy would you like to see released in America, I always go with the most obscure or lesser known material. For example, I would love to see official DVD releases of Ultraman Gaia, Metalder, Daitetsujin 17 or Giant Iron Robot 17, and Giant Iron Man 17. Forgot there's no robot in there. Those would be my top 3 picks for releasing this stuff into American entertainment. And weirder things have happened before. Like a couple of years ago, I would never imagine for a million years, for the life of me, that we would get an official DVD release of Iron King and Red Baron, or Giant Robot, Super Robot Red Baron. And that actually did end up happening thanks to the unfortunately now defunct company BCI Entertainment. BCI Entertainment made a name for themselves for releasing a bunch of those, cheap ass video sets, with 20 public domain movies on there. But they made so much money doing those that they decided to expand themselves and actually started releasing official product, mostly Filmation and television shows from the company Filmation. And then they decided to release the original Ultraman on DVD. Unfortunately, the company purchased the rights of Ultraman through the Thailand-based company Chio, who for a brief time had total control over all Ultraman items here in America. It's a long, complicated legal battle that unfortunately is still going on today, despite the fact that the most recent ruling was in favor for Tuburai Productions. So BCI Entertainment, even knowing they had a success with Ultraman, it still was a bit of an embarrassment, I guess, and they decided that the next tokusatsu series they would release would be directly from the actual Japanese company. Hence, they went with the more obscure, or at least definitely obscure here in America, but in Japan I think they both have their cult followings. Super Robot Red Baron and Iron King. And both shows are pretty good. And I was surprised that they got really decent releases here in the America, complete with like very beautiful booklets written by August Raccoon going into the history of these obscure shows. Unfortunately, BCI Entertainment kind of folded soon after the release of both of those shows, with another tokusatsu series from the same company, Silver Mask, not getting a release in America. Even sadder was planned, they had plans to do even more live-action Japanese series to America. Another one was Fight Dragon, or I don't know what the title is, but it was actually a live-action martial arts series that kind of followed the Monster of the Week, or in this case, the Villain of the Week formula. And both Silver Mask and Fight Dragon, I don't think they ever received, despite the fact that they were in the BCI archives after being purchased, along with Red Baron and Iron King, I think they've never seen an official DVD release, or even an online streaming release, although I could be mistaken, double check. But yeah, after that, it seemed that there was no tokusatsu coming to America at all. Then suddenly, a big surprise from, what best I can describe it, a big surprise from Tuburai Productions. They started official online streaming on Crunchyroll of some of their series. And then Shout Factory, not only did they release all the Power Rangers, but they took a chance and did Zoo Ranger, which is the original Japanese Super Sentai series that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1 is based on. Shout Factory they released some more Ultraman, but unlike the Crunchyroll deal, this was sort of Ultraman through Chio Productions, that Thailand company I previously mentioned. So they're okay releases, but they're semi-technically legal releases at the moment, but they're not official releases straight from Tuburai Productions themselves. So the Ultra 7, for example, the Ultra 7 television series has a banned episode 12 that's unavailable within Japan, but is readily available elsewhere outside the world. But only with Tuburai Productions makes it available. Unfortunately, because Shout Factory decided to go with Chio instead, the Ultra 7 disc set, which looks okay, but it has a bit of digital grain, and the subtitles, I don't know, as is the Shout Factory, that's a whole different situation on its own. And granted, a lot of times it's impossible to bring these tokusatsu shows into America because of some complicated right deals. In fact, that's probably one of the reasons really obscure stuff is probably just as hard to get as the official stuff. And also, who knows how much of an interest there is. For example, I know the Ultraman on Crunchyroll did very well. In fact, it was among the top 10 highest viewed online streaming episodes on that site, and Crunchyroll is mainly known for more contemporary anime. Unfortunately, it seems Tuburai Productions hasn't released any more of their original content, and they have tons of Ultraman shows they can release without the whole Chio production situation getting in the way. And among those series is Ultraman Gaia. To get back to that, Ultraman Gaia is the last of the 1990s Heisei trilogy of Ultraman shows, which started with Ultraman Tiga, followed by Ultraman Dyna, and last but not least, Ultraman Gaia, which itself was a standalone series disconnected to the previous two, which were direct sequels to one another. And what's unfortunate is Ultraman Tiga kind of got some mainstream exposure thanks to being aired on 4Kids Entertainment, dubbed by 4Kids Entertainment, and then released on American Saturday morning television for a couple of weeks, and then a bunch of DVD releases which are technically out of print, but they're still somewhat easy to find. I'll be honest with you, I can't stand Ultraman Tiga. Enshohma, why don't you like Ultraman Tiga? It's one of the best series ever made! Ooh. Now granted, Ultraman Tiga is sort of an important entry into the Ultraman franchise. It kind of brought the series back for a modern era. But as far as the show itself is concerned, I just find it a little obnoxious. I don't know, it's like a lot of the things I can't stand about a lot of anime shows, or Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which is literally my least favorite of the Godzilla movies, is a lot of the same reasons I can't stand Ultraman Tiga. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, everything I can't stand about Ultraman Tiga is improved immensely on Ultraman Gaia. Ultraman Gaia, a completely separate series from 1998, is fantastic. I love that series. I love its overarching narrative. The monsters are awesome. They come in a wide variety of different shapes and sizes due to their designs. Probably because they got a bunch of good artists on board, or the costumes are superior to the ones in Ultraman Tiga. The special effects are better. Some of the fight scenes are way more elaborate than what's in Tiga. In fact, I think the best way to describe Ultraman Tiga is it's like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, in the sense that the second series of Full Metal Alchemist, based closer to the manga. I love both animes, but I'll take Brotherhood as my personal preference. That has a great way of having an overarching story arc throughout the whole series while having tons of individual episodes, introduces tons of characters, but revisits them all, and it leads to a great climax where pretty much all the characters come together to fight against the final villain. Now, true, it's not as elaborately well done as Full Metal Alchemist. You can do a lot more in animation. Full Metal Alchemist probably has more memorable characters. And, of course, the main villain of Ultraman Gaia doesn't really make her full appearance known until, like, the last couple episodes, despite her presence being felt throughout the series, while Full Metal Alchemist gradually introduces you to the main villain halfway into the series, and basically sets up the stakes a hell of a lot better. But no, Ultraman Gaia is a fantastic series, and I really, really hope that gets an official release somehow, either to DVD, because it really is a great series for binge watching, or through online streaming. And again, I think it's a highly underrated series that needs more attention and fame. Unfortunately, because it's the third of the Heisei Ultraman, and it's not Ultraman Gaia, it gets overlooked quite a bit. So, similarly, another series that gets overlooked, and criminally so, perhaps even more so than Ultraman Gaia, is the 1980s tokusatsu series Metal Dur. Now, Metal Dur is probably better known as the Ryan Steele portions of VR Troopers from the American series VR Troopers. That from the first season, at least. That's when Ryan Steele would battle against Grimlord and his army of mutants and robots directly. Well, the original series was meant as sort of a homage/remake of a far more better-known 1970s series, Kikaider, Android Kikaider, as some of you anime fans might know. But to be honest, I think, again, like Ultraman Tiga, I'm not a big fan of Kikaider, but I love its successor, Metal Dur. And Metal Dur is a fantastic series. It doesn't have a major overarching story arc, but what it does have, it has so many great characters, because unlike most tokusatsu shows, which are literally monster of the week deals, Metalder introduces an entire army of villains in its first episode, and that entire army remains with the entire series, meaning that we get a lot of recurring villains, a lot of interaction between the villains in the group, between Metalder himself, our lead hero. And Metalder himself is a very honorable hero. He's a transforming android who can take on a human form, but he has his own code of ethics and morals that definitely conflicts with not just the monsters, but pretty much the morality you see in a lot of Japanese superhero series. You know, Metalder would rather try to reason and talk with his enemies before having been resort to destroy them. Not that he won't hold back, mind you. Some of the villains he fights in the Neos Empire are pretty despicable villains, but then there are some villains who have their own code of honor and who are really cool characters in their own right, and we see their own individual character arcs as the series go. And the designs for a lot of the villains are great. The design of Metalder is awesome. It was a highly ambitious and well-written series, especially for 1980s tokusatsu, and that was considered kind of a golden age for tokusatsu shows made from Toei Productions, who are more famous for their Kamen Rider Super Sentai shows. But Metalder is just a gem in its own right. And what's truly sad is that Metalder was kind of a bomb when it premiered on Japanese television, and the originally planned, I believe it was originally planned 50 episodes, were cut back to a measly 32, if not 39 episodes. If not, again, please double check this information. I don't have Wikipedia on me right now. I'm just doing basic coloring right now. If I had double screens, I would. But yeah, so the ambitious plans to have Metalder in organically was cut short, and the series kind of had a very crappy finale. And again, if I know that everyone prefers to see the original Super Sentai shows, but as far as I'm concerned, I would love to see Shout Factory release Metalder. It's a wonderful series. It's not only one of the best, most criminally underrated tokusatsu shows I've ever seen, but it might be one of the best sci-fi shows of the 80s, period. So, or probably one of the best superhero series ever made, period. You know, it's great characters, fantastic writing. And on the somewhat opposite end of the spectrum to Metalder, we have Daitetsujin 17. I have a friend named Andres, better known as Kaiju Noir, who is probably going to do a whole video based on Daitetsujin 17's American counterpart, which was known as Brain 17, which was a heavily edited compilation movie released on video during the 80s. But the series itself, which I was lucky enough to catch a bunch of episodes before Toei itself pulled them off, it's a 1977 live-action giant robot show that combines the best of both the super robots that were popular in anime at the time, as well as the, giant robot kaiju genre. Unlike most of those shows, however, it's deliberately played as an action comedy. There's some serious moments, characters do get killed in particular episodes, there are some tragedy and drama, but for the most part, it's a romp. It's a full-blown romp, and much like Metalder, and to a lesser extent Ultraman Gaia, Daitetsujin 17 has some really unique and some wonderful characters. I think the best example are the lead heroes and the lead villain. The lead villain is a supercomputer known as Mr. Brain, because he prefers to be called Mr. Brain, who wants to take over the world, but he also loves criminals and human beings, so he runs his organization like Spectra out of the James Bond films, if Spectra was a much nicer place to work at. And they also occasionally unleash giant robot monsters onto the world. And Mr. Brain himself has a wonderfully dysfunctional relationship with his human creator, who he keeps around as a general/whipping boy. And again, it's very broad. There's a lot of characters that act cartoony. In fact, the comical dub they gave Brain 17 actually matches some of the insane acting going on in the original Japanese. So this isn't a case where they completely missed the point. They kind of almost honored the point. And of course, Daitetsujin 17 himself, or simply Robot 17, he's great because he's not just a simple giant robot who follows orders or is piloted by heroes. He's a fully sentient, independent entity who is only helping our heroes so he can get back at his own daddy, Mr. Brain. So he's basically a rebel with something of a cause. So much so that he barely gets along with the very humans he's supposed to be working with in a lot of the early episodes. He mellows down and becomes a full-blown robot hero by the second half of the series. But for the most part, it's wonderful little character bits like that makes Daisetsusen 1-7 so unique and interesting. And not only that, but it's also kind of fun. It's like I said, it's a full-on romp. It's a hell of a lot of fun. And it only had a couple episodes. It was like, I think, just a little over 29, if not 30. But that actually works in its favor because it's a very good series. It moves at a good pace. And there's a lot of really fun episodes. And even when it gets dark and serious, it doesn't forget that it's Daisetsusen 1-7. So yeah, those are my top 3 picks for tokusatsu shows I would love to see released in America. First one being Ultraman Gaia, which is just a pure epic of the Ultraman franchise that needs more loving. Metal Dur, which is just a brilliant series that really needs to be seen to be believed. If you don't believe me, try to track down episode 11 of Metal Dur, involving a retired robot warrior named Big Wayne. Now, the great thing about the episode is it's told almost completely from the sympathetic point of view from Big Wayne himself, with Metal Dur only showing up in the last couple of minutes of the episode. But it really shows you just how great this series was. You know, a fantastic character piece, basically. And my third choice for a tokusatsu series be brought over to America is definitely Daisetsusen 1-7, because this is just way too funny, way too fun, way too action-packed to not get any love. I think even the most jaded of hardcore Godzilla fans who can't stand Japanese superhero shows might get a wonderful kick out of Brain 17 if they laugh along with it. You know, think of it like Army of Darkness. When you realize that it's one of those movies that you're better off laughing with it, along with it, as opposed to against it, then you get its humor, and it just becomes a full-blown romp. You just have a hell of a lot of fun with it. Okay, so let's see what the next question is. The second question comes from my friend RalphBear. What are your current feelings about the state of straight-to-DVD, pop horror, and monster flicks? And what I am referring to here is the silly named movies like Mega Shark, Sharktopus, Zombeaver, Sharknado, Arachnoquake, and others. These are usually films that bank on people watching them because of the absurd titles, Zombeaver proving to be a pretty good hit right now. Do you feel this is a step forward for filmmakers that wish to do more traditional monster films, or a step back? Are they having to sacrifice quality in others to entice the masses? Or is it good that more people are watching monster movies? And I filmed that wrong, and I framed that wrong, and I read that wrong. I did that all wrong. Okay, so the giant monster genre is kind of on a slight hibernation, if you will, but with recent successes, which I'll get into later, it looks like the genre is about to blow up in a big way, especially with superheroes kind of running their course a bit. But as far as all these monster movies that are made for the direct-to-video market with ridiculous names like Sharknado, Arachnoquake, Giant Robo-Maid, no. Okay, that was a terrible improv joke on my part. I'm sorry, everybody. As far as those movies are concerned, I could care less. Honestly, it's okay if you're a fan of some of these films, and yeah, even I've kind of been entranced with some of them. I'll name names in a moment. But as far as I'm concerned, it would be nice to see more serious giant monster movies, or serious monster movies and horror films in question, because a lot of these films, they're meant for laughs, they're meant for jokes, but usually the quality of them suck, or like there's more, like you get the feeling the filmmakers behind these films were more concerned with the title and the poster than the actual product itself. And let's face it, this isn't the 1950s, this isn't the 1960s or 70s where your low budget, where Roger Corman could take an incredibly low budget and make it look like a decent Hollywood fare. No, this is it's impossible to make independent, low-budget monster movies and make them look good at that, especially with the extreme reliance on low-budget CGI. Now, are all these movies bad? I really can't say, because I have been burned by Sci-Fi Channel so often that I've basically abandoned these direct-to-video monster movies long before things like Sharknado and Arachnoquake came on the scene with their wonderfully silly titles. I have watched some of the more recent films. Arachnoquake was pretty fun. It actually delivered quite a bit of monster action, and it was filmed mostly in the daylight, and but at the same time it suffered from some of the same cliches that I couldn't stand with Sci-Fi Channel monster movies. So I kind of gave up on that one, although again, a lot of monster action and in broad daylight and a little bit of a humorous edge. So it was probably one of the better Sci-Fi Channel movies I've seen or direct-to-video monster movies I've seen in a while. But that's really not saying much. As for Sharktopus, I was originally a defender of that movie because, again, tons of monster footage. It gave us exactly what we wanted. It wasn't one of those Sci-Fi Channel movies where you sit bored for an hour and 45 minutes and then the climax shows up and you get a proper monster movie. But on retrospect, I can't, I respect the movie for what it was and what it accomplished, especially since it came from deep breaths, Raphs, okay? It comes from Mr. Corman, Roger Corman, and he's somebody who I and another friend of mine, Louis Calderon, owner of the store Final Destination Games, link below unless I forgot it and screwed up. We're big fans of Roger Corman, and so is my youngest brother Gabe. In fact, he owns several of his films. Miguel too, my next to youngest brother. The middle child, if you will. Yeah, actually, we've grown up with Roger Corman, so we were kind of proud they had another success with Sharktopus. But then it led to Sharktopus 2, aka the one where Conan O'Brien wasn't that funny. I'm sorry, he wasn't. His cameo was painful. And I like Conan O'Brien. I'm not like, Justin Bieber or the Kardashians who will, they can't recognize a funny guy when they see one, or that's a whole nother subject in its own right. So I'll just say this: anybody who doesn't find Conan O'Brien funny and in a hateful manner, as opposed to he's simply not just my cup of tea, that person is probably not a nice person deep down. So, but again, that's another rambling rant from Enshohma. But yeah, I'm not too thrilled with all. It's like I'd like serious monster movies, but in this day and age, you either have to be ridiculous with the title or be ridiculous elsewhere. As for Zombiever, I've had some people actually recommend that one to me, saying that it's mostly practical effects, very little CGI, if any, and that it's actually a good monster movie despite its silly title and premise. But like I said, I've been burned by so many of these movies that I could do without them. So I'm more than okay, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to say it, but because of that, I've been revisiting a lot of the better monster movies from ages past, and thank goodness, because my extensive DVD collection is almost nothing but the old stuff, and sometimes the older stuff is better. I don't know. I'm not going to get into. Again, I'm starting to rant right now, but yeah, I'm not too much of a fan of the direct-to-DVD wacky monster titles, and I kind of hope we get out of that and start seeing more straight-faced, or at least more higher quality monster movies, science fiction and horror. But then again, I don't watch a lot of this stuff, so I really can't say.